So as Claudia had mentioned a moment ago, and it's something that maybe our listeners aren't aware of, we never sit down ahead of this show and talk about what the theme is going to be or what we're each looking at in something. It comes very cosmically, and it's very synchronistic. And so there's a beauty in the sense of we've just used a quote, and we're talking about sharing and everything. And we've utilized a quote that says, "To serve is honorable, to share one of life's greatest joys." And so in talking about this aspect of sharing and the synchronicity of the fact that that quote was utilized just recently, and today's show is now this, is mind-blowing in and of itself. But again, the unseen is constantly working through us as we're all aspecting, and as Claudia is talking about. And just to touch on this piece before I get into the intuitive messages, the aspect of sharing is very revealing. And as you had mentioned, Matt, what is the purity of your intention? Because if your intention in sharing from the get-go, it reveals itself instantaneously. Because if your intention is kind of mired in the outcome that you're seeking, then you are in essence sharing. Well, I would ask, are you really sharing? Because in that instance, sharing is to be open, is to be in a state of bliss, surrender, openness, purity. And in the sharing, the light is amplified. The light speaks for itself. And so when we come into an aspect of sharing, ask yourself, am I able to do this from a pure state of being, from a state of bliss, of purity? If you're not, don't do it. Because in essence, what that says is it will reveal to you in your own silence, as Claudia was speaking, in our own silence. If the answer is no, you'll automatically already know why. And therein lies an opportunity for you to then, as Matt said, get into the uncomfortable parts and do the necessary works to kind of undig or unlayer. Why am I not able to show up in a more pure way, in a more, with a pure intention? And vice versa, in the receiving of that, am I asking for all the wrong reasons? Because it goes both ways. As Sebastian was saying, two sides of the same coin. Is the ask in the share one where you're demonstrating purity, light, or are you demonstrating your shadow? So these are, it's not complicated. It just requires us to really stop and look at ourselves and then execute whether or not we're going to share, or, because again, as Matt said, and he's used the beautiful analogy of the cake and the baking of the cake, and, are you doing it for the joy of the cake? Because again, Claudia mentioned earlier, everything, people, places, things, it's all energy. My mom and my aunt were cake decorators for many, many years. So I have a very personal affinity to this of the fact that they would make the wedding cakes and the birthday cakes and everything. And we often joke now as adults and everything, when they cut into the cake, if they could hear what came out of it, because there was lots that went into it. Certainly a lot of love, many times, a lot of cuss words and other things, but this is the act of creating, and this is the act of giving. And yet what they always did was they did this from the purity of their heart. They did this truly from the purity of giving. It wasn't to be seen, just to be seen or to be noticed. They did it from the place of love. They wanted to give to whomever the recipient was a slice of love, a piece of love. And so it's a beautiful lesson, wonderful analogies. To get into the messages this week, the intuitive insight messages, I want to take a step back for just a moment. And last week, we were in a state of endings, beginnings, renewal, expansion, and this great possessing. And we had double 14s. And of course, the great harvest. And so we had the full moon yesterday. We have the equinox coming up tomorrow. And again, I've noticed in the numbers and the dates, and when I sat down to write this and listen, it was at 10:01. So you have ones which act as a gateway. You have zeros, which represent source. And so you can see that the way in all that we're talking about, the way to, the way through is going to be source. As Claudia mentioned, we are vessels. We are the custodian. You are the custodian of your life. You aren't your life. We're the custodian of that light, of that experience, that expression. And so how is it, what is it that we're doing with it? And in today, it's the 21st, and it's also 2021. So we have double 21s. And the first thing they said to me was, there's something, and this was then underlined, very magical, quote, in the air. And I immediately had this image of the Disney Pixar movie Up, and it's the hot air balloons, and he's rising. And the point of that is that he kind of put off things in life, and yet he wanted to go somewhere. He wanted, and we've all kind of, we're all slogging through, we're wanting to get somewhere. We're all wanting to experience literal joy, literal happiness, literal expansion, this literal freedom. And yet somehow, we've all signed up and we've gone through the elongating of it, the suffering of it, the getting to it. But the point is finally going to someplace, giving ourselves permission to truly go where we've always wanted to be, what we've known ourselves to be. And so there's something very magical in the air. That was also, and this is, here's the synchronicity. And they said, pay attention. And here was Claudia early talking about paying attention. And so this also then said to me, and they said the magic and the awe, the unseen all around us. So here's something very magical in the air. Pay attention. It's all around us. And they came then into the star card. And the star card, of course, is the divine feminine. There she is. And she's pouring out soma. She's pouring out wisdom, knowledge, life source, the silver thread, the cord. She's pouring out this soma, this heavenly divine spirit, this essence. And they said, again, this pouring forth all around us, through us. So there is an aspect that's in this week or in this moment of time that's presenting itself, that's saying, be aware, pay attention, look beyond what's directly in front of you, what's tangible, look and sense and feel what's unseen. There's an essence here of magic, awe, soma, life force that's going to be infusing everyone. It's very interesting, the intricacy here, because today is actually, when you add the month today in the year, it's a 17, which becomes an 8. The 17 is the star card in the tarot. It's number 17. So here's this direct tie. Number 8 is the magician. The magician has everything. The magician has all the tools. And here they're saying, look up, look around you, see the magic and the awe. The next thing they said is, and this was tying into this whole piece that everyone's been talking about in the sharing, and they said, maximize your efforts, your potential by releasing the chains that bind you. And Claudia had been speaking about, again, energy, but the people, the places, the things. We're talking about sharing, the thoughts, the beliefs. Matt had mentioned the habitual patterns. The release occurs regardless, but we still have to do the works. We still need to show up. We still need to open ourselves to the purity of our divine essence, our divine being. And when they said that the release occurs regardless, they then showed me, and I don't know how many around the world, but we would go on the playground and you would have what was called tetherball. And there was a central pole and there was a long rope, and attached to it was like a volleyball. And in essence, you would pop the ball back and forth around the pole, yet it was always tethered, attached to the central column, the pole. What they're saying here is the ball gets released. So here's the movie Up, this hot air balloon. The ball gets released. We're no longer going to be tethered or anchored to this central column that weighs us down or holds us back, this shadow element. And they said, you'll no longer be held down or back. So we're going to soar. We're going to fly freely, if you will. We're going to experience this light, this soma. And the last thing that they said was, and one more thing also, with the double 21s, before I get to the last thing, Claudia had mentioned Jupiter trining Mercury, and to look for great things. And with the double 21s, it's a very interesting piece because what came was the world card in the tarot. And it ties in with number 4 because it's about the change, the ending, the beginning, the world changing, the moment of change. But it also in the I Ching is about biting or cutting through. So facing the obstacles and gnawing it, cutting through it, so as to reach that evolution, that change, that turn. And the last thing was that they mentioned travel and movement. And they said moving into the right spaces, places, energies, and rhythms. So here again, there's a much greater opportunity, the great harvest, the equinox, that we're moving into a moment, a time where we truly move, change, go experience the things that we've been waiting for. And in order to more readily see them, those with eyes to see and ears to hear, look for them, pay attention, be open, be pure in your intentions and your sharing and your thoughts, and release the old.